Hello and welcome to Language, Culture, and Dr. Lou. And today I'd like to talk about some things in American culture that if you're American, you're probably going to find totally normal. But if you're foreign, visiting the US or staying to live here for a little while, you will probably notice every one of these things as unusual or different than how you do it in your home country. And so I'm not talking about capital C culture, like literature, theater, painting, etc. I'm talking about culture with a small c, things that, and within American culture, all these seem perfectly normal to us and unexceptional. And these are also things that if you've never lived in any other country other than the US, you might not know that these are not the same everywhere else. You might not know that some of these are particularly American and some are even exclusively American. And now let's start with the first thing. What am I getting at? For one, Americans drive everywhere, and that's no secret, right? Americans love driving. And some would say this is because, well, we have a lot of open space in the US, so a lot of things are pretty far from one to the other. Um, and that's fair enough. That explains it. But that doesn't explain how a lot of times when you're in town, in one town or in one city, and you're going not even that far away, like just a couple blocks, a lot of people are going to want to drive. Yeah. And it's funny in the US, if you know there are parking spaces available in a place, there's definitely going to be an American who decides to go ahead and drive, even if it's only, a 5 minute walk. Anyway, but yeah, so that's one thing that people notice about the US is that we drive everywhere, and that might contribute to all the highway congestion, right? So that's one thing that Americans we do. We drive everywhere a lot more. And one other thing I've noticed is we're a little less reliant on public transportation than I've seen in certain other countries. And I think that might be because, well, we're driving everywhere. Or maybe it's that public transportation is less useful because fewer people use it anyway. But yeah, so that's one thing. Americans drive everywhere. And what else do we do a lot? Hug. We hug a lot of people. Now, the US is not the only country where we might hug people as a greeting to greet them and to say goodbye, but we do it a lot more here, a lot more intensely here. Like, and this I think is a reflection of how American culture is a pretty informal culture, like how we jump as soon as we know somebody's name, we often jump right to first name basis with them. Um, and we often identify most everybody we know who's not a relative as a friend, right? That's why on Facebook, every single person that you ever met is called a friend. I think that's a reflection of American culture. And yeah, hugging, that's something that we do a lot of. Now, we're not the only ones, but we do a lot of this because we're so informal. Now, one thing to be warned about if you're if you're a foreigner, if you're in the US, we don't Americans don't greet a lot of people by kissing or even kissing on the cheek. That is strictly um for romantic relationships and occasionally immediate family, right? So yeah, and but don't worry if you're not into hugging. Once you know people a little better, you can always just offer them a handshake instead. Yeah, sometimes that's how I prefer to do it, but it depends where you are. And so what else is typical in the US? Supersized everything. Anyone who has lived in a country that finds itself on any other continent besides the Americas, well, besides North America, I guess that's the one we're talking about now. Um, Everyone who has gone and lived somewhere else has noticed all uh, a big size difference in the food sizes and the beds and the appliances and the cars. Like pretty much everything here is like 30-40% bigger than it would be anywhere else. And that is one of the first things that um yeah, that struck out to me while I was living in Europe. I was like, wow, this small fridge, this small stove, all of this is working out perfectly fine. And I guess with the gigantic refrigerators we have, that gets more useful because in the US, a lot of our foods are very, very processed and have a lot of preservative chemicals. So they will stay good in the fridge for a lot longer than they were if they didn't have all the preservatives in them. But yeah, and that kind of explains why we also only go to the grocery store once every week or two, whereas in certain other places, you're going to go more often to get fresh produce, fresh bread, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's one thing about the US. Everything is bigger here, especially the cars and especially the portions of food at a restaurant. You're often giving a portion of food that is way too big to eat or way too unhealthy to eat the whole thing. And that's kind of why a lot of Americans are very used to bringing home leftovers, right? So that's, yeah, that's something that strikes me out as very American, is everything is really, really big here. And now what else? We've got ice cubes in restaurant drinks. That's normal in the US. And this is something how I have been in several other countries with Americans. Um, excuse me. And this is something that often gets complained about in other countries. I mean, complained about by Americans in other countries is the water on your table in a restaurant is tepid because there's no ice in it or anything like that. And even in a lot of your other beverages, there's not ice. Whereas in the US, sometimes our glass is full of more ice than beverage. Like we put so much ice into the drinks, we're so used to them being cold. But if you're an American planning to travel abroad, don't be surprised if you don't see the same thing everywhere else you go, right? And and I think the benefit to that, if you don't have a bunch of ice in your drink, is you get more beverage, and the beverage itself does not get watered down as the ice melts. So there are pluses to this. But yeah, as an American, I'm very much used to having uh, my drinks very cold at a restaurant, which means plenty of ice. And so what else? Oh, every single fall, it seems like all of a sudden America becomes obsessed with pumpkins. It's all of a sudden pumpkin everything and pumpkin flavor everything. Pumpkin spice is a flavor that only seems to be available in the fall on most products. And maybe this comes from, I don't know, Thanksgiving, where pumpkin pie is a favorite. And just looking at that pumpkin pie with a dollop of whipped cream on it is making me hungry right now. But wrong time of year for that, right? Anyway, and and so we have lots of things even in fast food restaurants. We get pumpkin. flavored things, and everywhere from Cheerios to peanut butter to Pop Tarts to Oreo cookies, all of this, we end up coming out with pumpkin or pumpkin and spice flavors, for all of these, even lip balm and lip gloss and lipstick, all of these too, we end up seeing pumpkin varieties. And then you have something I don't have any pictures of on this screen, beauty products like face masks and things like that. They end up coming in pumpkin flavor too. So that's something, yeah, you might, yeah, if you're coming to visit the US in the fall and you're not into the flavor of pumpkin, you're gonna be missing out on a lot of the offerings here, and you might be just annoyed by how much pumpkin there is, but, I say go with it as a seasonal thing because it doesn't stick around all year long, and so, yeah, Americans, yeah, we end up obsessed with pumpkins and pumpkin flavor pretty much every fall. And yeah, and I'm not sure how many, um, yeah, how much we can equate that to agriculture and how pumpkins grow well in the climate in the US, or at least a lot of the parts of it. Um, but yeah, but it seems to be the thing where every fall it's pumpkin, pumpkin, pumpkin. And that's not something that you get in every other country in the world, right? So I wanted to point that one out too. And so, what about the imperial measurement system? And by the way, lots of countries have over the centuries used the imperial measurement system. Mostly these are former colonies of England, which means we don't all use the exact same imperial metric system, imperial measurement system, because is the one that was in place at the time we were colonized. So, so some things change, but still, um, and a lot of people who are not American are very much mystified by why we could stick to the system because it doesn't really make any sense as compared to metric. Now, I'm not here to just extol the virtues of the metric system, but I will say it does seem easier to figure out measurements if everything is in the tens. If everything is by 10, it seems so perfectly logical to me that water freezes at 0 degrees and boils at 100 degrees, right? That all seems very logical. Uh, but in the imperial system, of course, water freezes at 32 degrees and doesn't boil until 212 degrees. What's with the 180-degree difference between those two? And what's with the 32 degrees just sitting there below freezing, but still not in the negative? That to me, anyway. And so, and how different is Celsius versus Fahrenheit? We got a typical, if you're looking for what is a healthy temperature of somebody's body to have, um, 98.6 degrees on average, we say. You know that in Celsius, your blood would be practically boiling at at a heat of 98.6 degrees. So very different thing. And of course, I wonder who decided that 12 inches equals a foot and 3 feet to 1 yard, and which means that 1 yard is 36 inches and a mile, 5,280 feet. That's peculiar number for it to add up to. It doesn't seem like there's a really well thought out system behind this. And very few people, if you don't shoot guns, which is also, yeah, I'll admit that's part of American culture too. We are gun happy. But if you don't do riflery or hunting or setting in guns, you might not know that 1,760 yards is in a mile, and that's something that I don't remember off the top of my head because I don't have any use to know this. And yeah, so it's kind of funny. And one thing that I think is funny is that I have a little map on there to show how rare it is in this day and age for anybody to be using the imperial measurement system. Look on that world map, everybody in blue is in the metric system, or at least they're mainly metric system. Like in this, so this includes Canada. I would include that as a country that is mainly metric because they did switch over to the metric system, but people are still remembering the imperial system and using it too. Like if you ask a Canadian how tall they are, they'll tell you that in feet and inches, right? But if you ask them how far is the distance to somewhere, that's going to be in meters or kilometers, or if it's really short, maybe centimeters. But anyway, yeah. And so Canadians, um, too, that's one thing an American has to do when they get used to when they drive well, north of the border into Canada, you have to start keeping track of how fast you're driving using kilometers per hour, not just miles per hour, right? But anyway, and there's a couple of countries like that. The one country I would point to is really mixed, as a mixed use of imperial and metric. That would be the United Kingdom, because they're well, they invented the damn imperial system, but they have done quite a bit of transitioning over to metric. And yeah, so it's only three countries in this whole world these days that are mostly imperial measurement system. That would be the US, Liberia, and Myanmar. That's it. So I'm not sure why we are, yeah, dragging our feet on this one because, how if you do mechanics, most Americans, we need like two sets of tools, one being imperial or our so-called standard measurement, and the other one being metric, uh, because so many car parts come from abroad, and so going to be metric. Anyway, so yeah, that's one thing. And this is something I'm sure a lot of foreigners notice when they come here. And I'm sure it's something we Americans notice when going abroad is you got to be thinking metric as far as weather forecast and temperature on the stove and how long how far away something is, or that it's you got to think metric. And so, one other thing that's very typically American, very quintessentially in America, and this would be in university life. And with, by the way, that's one thing that's American. We use the word college as a synonym to university, as opposed to in other places where the word college is going to be used. That's something you do a little earlier before you move on to university, but still. So colleges in the US, a lot, most of them have fraternities and sororities organizations there. And a lot of people in other countries might already know of these because you see them in American television shows and in their movies and all that, right? But the thing is, you might want to know if you're a foreigner, they're not exactly like they look like on TV or in the movies, okay? It's not as outrageous necessarily, but there are still kind of sometimes some real doozies of parties going on there. And and one thing that's important is that one thing fraternities and sororities are for is you get into them in college so you can network, use them for a cool networking tool to advance your career. That's part of the idea of it too. But yeah, these are something that you're not going to find in a whole lot of other countries. Even though we call it the Greek system, That's mostly, I think, just because of the letters that we're using to identify each fraternity and each sorority. But yeah, so these are pretty unique to college, to American college culture anyway. And yeah, like I said, not usually as outrageous and wild as what you see in the movies, but yeah, but they do exist. And by the way, hazing is still a problem in many of them. Even though most frats and most sororities have an anti-hazing policy, and every single campus has an anti-hazing policy, kids are getting arrested for this in many places multiple times a year, so we know it's still going on. Anyway, so what else? One other thing that we Americans might not realize is much of a bigger deal here than it is in other countries is Halloween. And no, Halloween is not uh unique to the US, right? There's a couple dozen countries around the world that do celebrate Halloween to one extent or another. But in the US, Halloween is so important in terms of how widely it's celebrated. It's celebrated by nearly as many people as Christmas of all holidays, right? And the obvious ones that are super American are the 4th of July, Independence Day and Thanksgiving. Of course, we Americans recognize those as very, very American holidays, but Halloween, we might not know just how much bigger it is here than elsewhere. And one other thing you might not know as an American about Halloween is, it's not a federal holiday. This is why nobody gets a day off for Halloween. Well, almost nobody gets the day off or anything like that. And even while schools are incessant on Halloween, and lots of elementary schools do little costume contests and stuff like that, or even costume parades and whatnot. And of course, yeah, it's celebrated so widely, and other countries might get an impression of how important it is in the US by watching some of our movies. And that's why when talking about what a big deal Halloween is in the US, I couldn't help myself but include a couple of things um, from the Karate Kid. And you've got and actually, well, anyway, the one all the way in the farthest down left, that corner, that's from the original movie, The Karate Kid in the 80s, with um, well, Danielle LaRusso being the Karate Kid, and so all the Cobra Kai guys are dressed in skeletons, skeletons and whatnot. And the other picture I think is from the Netflix show Cobra Kai, but it's a reference to the same scene. There's a Halloween party, right? And the person dressed in the shower thing there from the original movie, that's a callback to the movie there where that was Daniel LaRusso, the Karate Kid, putting himself in the shower. And why did the Cobra Kai guys come after him? Not just because they're evil people looking to pick on people. He was kind of asking for it when he went and well into the bathroom one time. You might remember the scene where Johnny Lawrence, he was in the bathroom stall rolling a joint and whatnot, and then Daniel LaRusso just comes and I think he used a hose to fill him with to dump water all over him, something like that. So in a way, he was asking for retaliation. Anyway, but yeah, Halloween is a much bigger deal here than it is most anywhere else. And and it's not even technically a federal holiday. So that to me is interesting. And tailgating, that's also a very American pastime before a sporting event, especially a football game. And by football game, I mean American football, right? And So tailgating, of course, this is you grab a little grill and maybe a cooler for all your beverages and have some food and do a little pregame partying before the game even begins. You're already getting full up on good food and possibly drunk a little bit. No wonder people are so rowdy at football games if a lot of people are tailgating ahead of time. Anyway, but yeah, and so that's a very American thing. And of course, it's usually we do this in the parking lots, right? And it's amazing. I included a couple of different pictures of tailgating examples because sometimes it's amazing, like there's so much tailgating going on that there's almost nowhere in the whole parking lot that people are not tailgating. Anyway, so that tailgating is usually a pregame party, but every once in a while it happens elsewhere. Like um, there was plenty of tailgating in Walmart parking lots when we had this eclipse that came around about a year ago or so. It was in the spring of 2024. There was a big eclipse that went in over a lot of places in this country and other countries, but a lot of places in the US. And in Walmart parking lots, there were a lot of people tailgating there to all watch the eclipse together. And so that brings me to Walmart culture, which is also very American. And so, what do I mean by Walmart culture? I mean, in the US, we have not just a supermarket culture where we expect to be able to get everything that we can eat or all the groceries, everything we would want to eat in one place. Uh, and we also have department stores. Again, that's about getting as many things in one place as possible. And what store brings that together? Walmart. A Walmart supercenter, like the picture in the image in the corner, all the way down below me. Um, that reminds me of the Walmart supercenter that we have in Albany. Here where you got a big portion of the downstairs is all a huge grocery store, and then there's other stuff. And then upstairs sells like everything. And that's the thing about Walmart culture is we Americans, we like buying a lot of stuff and we like buying it cheap. That's why we import so much stuff from other countries because it's cheap, it's cheaper to be made over in the other countries than in our country. And that's where Walmart comes into the mix. They have this uh, business model of running on low margins because they're going to sell a lot of every product. And so their profit margins are low. So any kind of tariffs, especially between the US and China, that will hurt them quite a bit. And what else do I mean by Walmart culture? Well, we used to have people called greeters working at Walmart. A lot of them were elderly. Uh, and although they got rid of the greeters and changed them to, well, it's another role called something like a customer host role, something like that, which is slightly different. And it's also about being able to buy everything you could think of, everything under the sun on the cheap and in one place altogether. If you're looking for stuff for your car or some gardening or household chores or furniture or clothing or like I mentioned, groceries or even booze um, and cigarettes and all this. You can get them all in the one place. So that's, that to me is it's yeah, really highlighting the consumerist nature of American culture. We're very much consumers. And by the way, I have a couple pictures in here of Walmart shoppers with pajamas on, because that's part of Walmart culture too. It attracts a certain kind of American, and namely by that I mean the kind of American who's not embarrassed to go out in public and have it look like they just rolled out of bed, right? And anyway, so yeah, Walmart culture, that's a big a big deal in the US, although not every single American um, shops at Walmart, especially eyebrow folks tend to try to avoid it. But still, yeah, it's a very, very important little piece of American culture, Walmart. And now, excuse me, one of the things I wanted to bring up is how many fewer vacation days that Americans get from work than most any other country. And this is not to say that we don't get any vacation days or any sick days or any paid holidays at all. It's just these are not so required by federal laws the way they are in a lot of other countries. And so we get 0 days guaranteed off, right? And yeah, and surprisingly to me, since we have so many fewer holidays that and vacation days that we can take off, and as you know, fellow Americans, I'm sure there's not always a difference in how your employer is considering vacation days versus sick days. We all lump them in as personal days, and you might earn 1 or 2 more days a month or only half a day per month. And what's surprising is, out of every 10 American workers, four of us have we have unused vacation days by the end of the year. Like we have fewer vacation days than they do in most every other developed country, but still we don't end up using them all. We end up letting a lot of them just sit there unused. And that is interesting to me. And yeah, so, oh, and here are this thing. I hope you've been reading if you care to compare it with other countries from North America or Europe. But yeah, but the moral of the story is, yeah, Americans are can't take for granted having a lot of days off from work. That for me is part of why I work at a university, because teachers and instructors, what we lack in salary, we make up for in vacation days, right? Although I don't get to decide when the vacations land, the school does, but hey, plenty of days off. Anyway, and so one last thing, I guess we've done already 11 of these now. This is number 12, which I think that brings us to the end. This one is a little less cultural than linguistic, but of course, language, culture, intrinsically tied. And so, one thing that a lot of Americans might not know is that we are pretty much the only people in the world who, when we say the word America, at least 99% of the time, we're talking exclusively about the United States of America. That was not something I ever noticed until the first time I went and spent time living in another country. Actually, this country was Canada. And and all of a sudden, I heard some Canadians using the term American and America, kind of like the people would use the terms European and Europe or African, Africa, right? Referring to the whole continent, where a lot of Canadians, yeah, I've heard them using this to describe, oh, everyone in North America, pretty much. Um, but no, this is in the US. When someone says America, they mean they're talking exclusively about the United States of America. And if they are not, they're adding a qualifier, like they will say North America, South America, Central America, right? We will add a qualifying word onto it if we're not talking about the 50 states of the US. And yeah, and by the way, I also included a map on here of what other people think of as America, which is, North America, South America, and all the rest. So you can't really see Greenland very well on that. That's the giant island in red that's mostly behind my image. But yeah, that's one thing is we use the word America, and we're the only English speaking country in the world that when we use the word America, we're almost exclusively referring to the United States of America. And this is especially true with anybody who pronounces it America, right? We have America. If someone is saying America, they're definitely talking exclusively about the US. And they're probably excluding some of our territories like Puerto Rico as well, when they're saying America. And there you go. So that's pretty American as well as far as the cultural norm goes. And so that was the dozen very American cultural norms I had to share with you today. Now, if you can think of any others, please share them in the comments. I would love to hear all about them. I only used a dozen examples because I didn't want this video to last on forever. But I certainly know there are lots more good ones. So let's please discuss in the comments. And please do give this video a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, I would very much appreciate that. If you do, it's free and takes just a click, and it would mean so very much to me. So again, thanks for watching the video, and yeah, and until the next one, yeah, I will see you around next time. Bye bye.